Have you ever imagined being humiliated by someone who judges you just by your appearance? What if that person didn't even suspect that, the next day, their life would be turned upside down? Sometimes, destiny takes care of teaching the greatest lesson in life in the most merciless way possible. And that's exactly what happened in this shocking story you're about to watch now. Prejudice and arrogance make many people believe that they can treat others as they please. But believe me, life always finds a way to put everyone in their rightful place. The driver in this story thought he could humiliate a humble lady with impunity. What he didn't imagine was that the next day he would be faced with the biggest upheaval of his life. Get ready, because this is one of those stories that make us lose faith in humanity, but in the end, give us that feeling of justice being done. If you have ever been treated with disrespect by someone who thought they were superior, this video is for you. And I'll tell you, you won't believe what happened next. Now tell me, have you ever been through a similar situation? Has anyone ever humiliated you without knowing who you really were? Leave your comment below, because I want to know your story. And if you like seeing justice being done, leave a like, because what happened to this driver will make your skin crawl. He thought he had the right to humiliate, but the next day, he learned the worst lesson of his life, and you will understand exactly why. Some people think they can judge others by their appearance, the clothes they wear, or the money they have in their pockets. But life always finds a way to put everyone in their rightful place. And that's exactly what happened to this arrogant driver, who had the audacity to humiliate a lady without even imagining that the next day he would regret it bitterly. Imagine the scene: a humble lady with a good heart who just wanted to follow her path in peace. She hailed a car for a quick run as anyone would. But upon entering the vehicle, she was greeted with looks of contempt and words full of arrogance. "Are you sure you can pay for this fare, madam?" said the driver, with a mocking tone, analyzing every detail in her simple way. And as if that wasn't enough, he did something even worse. In the middle of the journey, without any explanation, he simply ordered her to get out of the car. No ceremony, no mercy. He didn't want to waste his precious time on someone who in his eyes didn't deserve to be there. But what this driver didn't know was that, by acting like this, he wasn't just humiliating some random lady. He was messing with the wrong person, because that woman, that lady he despised, was none other than Jordan's mother. And if there's one thing Jordan won't tolerate, it's injustice. When he found out what happened, his reaction was immediate. The driver had no idea what was coming. And believe me, what happened the next day would change his life forever. Jordan's mother has always been a humble, hard-working woman, one of those people who carry the kindness in their eyes and the strength in their hearts of someone who has faced many difficulties in life. Even without sporting expensive clothes or shiny jewelry, she carried something much more valuable: dignity and respect for everyone around her. He always treated each person kindly, never judging anyone for their appearance or social status. And that day, all she wanted was to go her way in peace. She had an important commitment, something that meant a lot to her, and so she decided to call a luxury car to ensure a smooth trip. It wasn't something she did often, but like everyone else, she wanted comfort in that special moment. With her simple way, wearing discreet clothes and carrying a small bag already worn out by time, she waited on the sidewalk without imagining that in a few minutes she would experience one of the greatest humiliations of her life. As soon as the car stopped, she approached with a polite smile, as she always did when meeting anyone, but all it took was opening the door and taking the first step into the vehicle to notice something strange. The driver gave him a look of contempt, the kind that says more than words. His eyes analyzed every detail of her, as if he were trying to measure whether that woman was really capable of being there. The uncomfortable silence was broken when he asked, with a cold and arrogant tone, "Are you sure you can afford this fare?" The question landed like a punch in the stomach. For a moment, Jordan's mother didn't react. "I had never experienced anything like this. Why did that man think she couldn't pay? Why was she being treated this way just because of her appearance?" Still trying to remain calm, she replied that yes, that she could pay, and that she just wanted to be on her way. But the driver seemed determined to humiliate her. He huffed impatiently, rolled his eyes, and started the car roughly, as if he were doing her a huge favor by transporting her. The discomfort in the air was so heavy that it seemed impossible to breathe. Jordan's mother's gaze was fixed on the window, trying to ignore the rude way she was being treated, but inside she felt a lump forming in her throat. "Now tell me, have you ever been judged by your appearance?" Have you ever been in a situation where someone belittled you without even knowing you? Comment here. Respect comes first, because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Jordan's mother tried to ignore the discomfort, focusing only on the destination she needed to reach. Her manner was always peaceful, polite, and she believed that respect was something that should come before anything else. But that day in that car, she felt that respect was far from existing. The driver continued to give impatient looks, as if every second of that race was a huge inconvenience for him. His disdainful expression was impossible to ignore, and the silence inside the vehicle seemed increasingly heavy. After a few minutes of driving, he looked in the rearview mirror and asked again, this time in an even ruder tone, "Are you sure you can afford this ride?" The question came like a cold blade, cutting through any shred of dignity Jordan's mother still tried to maintain. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure, and replied as calmly as possible, "Yes, I can pay." But the driver was not satisfied. He let out a mocking laugh and shook his head as if doubtful. "Because look, this car isn't for everyone, you know? There are a lot of people who want to pay richly, but when it comes to paying out the money, it disappears." The words stung like a blow. Jordan's mother felt her hands tremble slightly, but she remained firm. She never needed to prove anything to anyone. He knew that, regardless of anything, his dignity was priceless. But the driver seemed determined to demote her. He huffed impatiently and muttered something she couldn't understand. Soon after, he started driving abruptly, as if he wanted to make her uncomfortable on purpose. The minutes seemed to drag by. The path that should have been just a journey to their destination was becoming a humiliating and harrowing experience. Jordan's mother tried to look out the window, focus on the world outside so she wouldn't have to face that man, but the energy inside the car was suffocating, until, suddenly, without any warning, the driver made a decision that went beyond all limits. In the middle of the journey, without any explanation, he stopped the car abruptly on the side of the road. The sound of tires screeching on the asphalt made her heart race. Before she could even ask what was going on, the driver turned back and said coldly, "Get out, now." She was in shock. "I didn't understand." "What?" he asked, trying to process the situation, but he was already unlocking the doors. "I said get down, now. I don't have time for the likes of you." Jordan's mother felt her heart race. For a moment she stood still as if her mind refused to believe what was happening. The driver was actually telling her to get out of the car in the middle of the street, as if she were worthless. She hadn't done anything wrong, she hadn't given any reason to be treated that way. But there she was, being thrown out as if she were a nuisance, a burden, someone who didn't deserve to be there. Her eyes watered, but she held back the tears with all the strength she had. "I wouldn't cry. Not in front of this man who clearly didn't have an ounce of respect or humanity." Her hands shook slightly as she grabbed her bag, and without arguing, opened the door and got out of the car. The driver didn't even wait for her to close the door completely before accelerating and disappearing into the traffic, as if he was in a hurry to get rid of her. She stood there on the sidewalk, not knowing what to do. The cold wind hit his face, and a feeling of helplessness took over his chest. People hurried past, some casting curious glances, but no one stopped to ask if she was okay. She took a deep breath, trying to regain control, but the lump in her throat felt bigger and bigger. Never in her entire life had she felt so humiliated, so small. She looked around, trying to find her bearings. He was far from his destination, but at that moment, that wasn't what mattered. What really hurt wasn't the distance. It wasn't the inconvenience of having to find another means of transport. What really hurt was the way she had been treated, as if it were invisible, as if it had no value at all. With shaking hands, she picked up her cell phone and dialed Jordan's number. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but he knew right away that something was wrong. "Mom, what happened?" he asked, already worried. She tried to minimize the situation. She didn't want to worry him. He told her what had happened, but before Jordan could react, she was quick to say, "Son, let it go, don't do anything, I just wanted to get it off my chest." But on the other end of the line, Jordan said nothing. A heavy silence settled in, and at that moment, she knew something was about to happen, because Jordan would never let such an injustice go. Jordan was silent for a few seconds, but inside, a whirlwind of feelings took over him. His blood was boiling, his heart was beating faster, and his fists were clenched. He always had immense respect for his mother, knew every sacrifice she had ever made for him, and knew how strong a woman she was. But hearing her voice so dejected, realizing the pain hidden behind her words, made something awaken inside him, an uncontrollable revolt. He didn't know who he was messing with, Jordan thought, his expression closed. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but it was impossible. The image of his mother, alone, humiliated on the sidewalk, being kicked out of a car as if it were nothing, never left his mind. How could someone be so cruel? How did this driver have the audacity to treat a woman like that, without even knowing who she was? He knew his mother didn't want him to do anything, but that wasn't an option. Such an injustice could not go unnoticed. Jordan took out his cell phone and started to act. Within minutes, I already had the name of the company the driver worked for. He knew that large luxury transportation companies had a strict system, and it was only a matter of time before he got the name of the person responsible for humiliating his mother. It didn't take long to find what I needed. With a few calls and some online searches, Jordan was able to access reviews, records, and even the driver's full name. He read every comment about him and, to his surprise, realized that his mother was not the first victim. There were several complaints about his arrogant behavior and rude treatment of passengers who, in his opinion, did not seem important enough. Jordan's indignation only grew. He wouldn't let this go. It was time to teach that driver an unforgettable lesson, something he would never forget. Now tell me, what would you do in Jordan's place? Have you ever seen someone being humiliated like this? Comment, justice must be done, because respect is for everyone. Jordan knew that the best way to deal with this situation was not just with words, but with a lesson that this driver would never forget. He didn't just want to expose the man's arrogance, he wanted to make him feel the weight of his own arrogance. And to do that, I needed to act strategically. He took out his cell phone and accessed the luxury transportation company's website. With a few clicks, he found the most expensive option available, an exclusive service for VIP customers with differentiated service and access to highly qualified drivers. Without thinking twice, he made the reservation and, before finishing, he made a special request. He demanded that that exact driver be responsible for the race. On the other side, the driver accepted without hesitation. After all, a premium ride meant a high payout, and that's exactly what he wanted. Little did he know that he was about to fall into a perfect trap. Jordan then started planning every detail. He knew he needed to remain calm and act intelligently. The driver wouldn't recognize him immediately, as Jordan wasn't used to exposing his personal life so much, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that in just a few minutes, he would be face to face with the man who humiliated his mother. And this time, the rules of the game would be different. The idea that the driver would treat him with the same arrogance with which he treated his mother only further fueled the desire to teach him an unforgettable lesson. Jordan chose to wear something discreet, nothing that would draw attention right away. He wanted to see the man's true behavior before revealing who he really was. Upon receiving notification of the confirmed race, the driver was excited. A VIP client. Finally, someone who knows the value of this service, he muttered to himself, without imagining that he was about to experience the worst day of his life. The black, luxurious car stopped exactly at the indicated location. Jordan looked in the rear view at the driver's face, which was serious but showed restrained satisfaction. He was clearly happy to get a VIP passenger, someone who, in his mind, really deserved to be in that car. Little did he know that he was about to face the biggest upheaval of his life. Jordan calmly opened the door and got into the car, keeping a neutral expression. The driver didn't even make eye contact, just confirmed the race and started driving. The silence inside the vehicle was almost deafening, and Jordan knew this was the perfect time to begin his test. "Do you like your job?" Jordan asked, looking at the man in the rearview mirror. The driver, without realizing the tone of the question, just laughed and responded with disdain. "I like it when I see clients who really suit this type of service. There are a lot of people who want to appear to be something they're not." Jordan raised an eyebrow. That was exactly the kind of response he was hoping for. "And how do you know who deserves to be here or not?" he asked, feigning curiosity. The driver sighed, clearly thinking he was dealing with someone who shared his elitist mindset. "Ah, my friend, it's easy. You can tell by the person's appearance, their clothes, their behavior. There are people who shouldn't even try to get into a car like that." Jordan felt his blood boil. The man's arrogance was so natural that he didn't even understand what he was saying. He was completely at ease, without imagining that, in that car, sitting in the back seat, was the very son of the woman he humiliated the day before. It was then that Jordan decided it was time to close that little theater. He took a deep breath, crossed his arms, and released the sentence. That would change everything. Do you remember that woman you kicked out of the car yesterday? The one who, according to you, shouldn't even try to get into a car like that? The driver was silent. Jordan leaned forward a little and added, "That was my mother." The driver remained motionless for a few seconds. His expression, once confident and arrogant, dissolved into pure panic. He blinked several times, trying to process what he had just heard. His hands, which were tightly gripping the steering wheel, began to sweat. His breathing became labored. His face lost color. He realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Jordan continued looking at him with a serious expression, without looking away, waiting for his reaction. The silence inside the car was overwhelming. The driver tried to swallow hard, opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His entire body began to shake, and he realized that he wasn't just carrying some random passenger. He was facing the son of the woman he humiliated, facing someone who clearly had the power to make his life a living hell. This must be some mistake, he tried to stammer, but his voice came out shaky, weak. Jordan, without changing his expression, leaned forward slightly and said firmly, "You think this is a mistake? You think I don't know exactly what you did? You had the audacity to humiliate my mother, to treat her like she was worthless. What now? Now you're sitting there, shaking, because you realize you messed with the wrong person." The desperate driver tried to justify himself. "Sir, I didn't know it. It was a misunderstanding." But Jordan didn't want to hear empty excuses. He had seen these types of people before. People who humiliate others when they think there are no consequences, but who despair when they realize they will pay for what they did. "Stop the car, now!" Jordan ordered firmly. The driver hesitated for a second, but realized he had no choice. With his hands still shaking, he pulled the car over to the side of the road, swallowing hard, feeling his heart almost come out of his mouth. Jordan didn't wait a second longer. He opened the door, got out of the vehicle, and without taking his eyes off the driver, gave the final sentence, "Now get out of the car, you're fired." What do you think happened next? Did the driver deserve this lesson? Comment, "Justice has been done," if you agree with Jordan, and tell me what you would do in that situation. The driver was paralyzed. His face, once full of arrogance, was now pale, filled with despair. He looked around as if looking for a way out, but there was nowhere to run. Sweat dripped down his forehead as his lips trembled. Jordan remained motionless, staring at him, waiting for a reaction. The silence was overwhelming. Then, as if he had finally understood the gravity of the situation, the driver swallowed hard and stammered, "Please, listen to me. I made a mistake." His voice wavered. The man who, until recently, humiliated others without a second thought, was now vulnerable, desperate to find a way to escape the consequences. But Jordan didn't move a muscle. He waited. The driver took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. His pride still fought the need to humble himself, but he knew he no longer had a choice. I didn't know who she was," he tried to justify. Jordan narrowed his eyes. "What if you had known? Would you have treated my mother differently? Do you think respect is only due to those who have money, status, or fame? Do you think you can judge someone by their appearance and decide who deserves dignity or not?" The driver lowered his head. "I knew that any answer would be useless." Jordan's words hit hard, like knives cutting through every bit of his arrogance. He took a deep breath, looked into the eyes of the man in front of him, and continued. "Respect comes before everything. You can't choose who deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone deserves it. My mother is no different from anyone else. She doesn't need expensive clothes to deserve consideration. She doesn't need to show off anything to be respected. But you decided you could humiliate her. And now what do you feel? Are you scared? Feeling small? Because that's how you made her feel." The words were like a mirror. The driver saw himself reflected in his own arrogance and realized the size of the mistake he made. His eyes started to water. Shame weighed on his shoulders like an unbearable burden. He took a deep breath, swallowed his pride, and with a trembling voice he begged, "Please, give me a chance. Let me prove that I can change. Forgive me." Jordan remained silent for a few moments. He knew he could end the man's career with a simple command, but was it worth it? Would publicly exposing his arrogance be enough? Or would it be better to turn that humiliation into a learning experience that he would never forget? It was then that Jordan made his decision. He stepped forward, faced the driver and said, "What you did was despicable. You treated my mother like she was nothing, but I'm not like you. I don't humiliate anyone, I teach. So instead of ending your life, I'm going to give you the chance to learn something you should have learned a long time ago." The driver looked up, not knowing what to expect. Jordan took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "From now on, you will remember this day for the rest of your life. Because this moment is not just about you, it's about all the people who have ever been humiliated by someone who thinks they are superior. Today you will learn that true greatness is not in those who have money or status, but in those who know how to treat others with respect." The driver swallowed hard, feeling each word sink in deep. What Jordan didn't know was that all of this was being recorded. Within minutes, the video of that scene began to spread across social media. Jordan's speech went viral, reaching thousands of people who identified with the story. Many commented on their own stories, recounting situations in which they were humiliated by those who thought they were superior. The message spread like wildfire, and one phrase began to dominate the comments: "Respect comes first." Here is the continuation of your script, following exactly the structure, persuasive tone, and emotional connection to keep the audience engaged. Jordan took a deep breath, watching the driver still trembling in front of him. The silence that took over the car seemed suffocating, an invisible weight that squeezed the chest of someone who knew what was wrong. The man, who until minutes ago exuded arrogance, was now reduced to a lost look, filled with shame. He understood that he had crossed a line that should never have been crossed, but had he really learned his lesson? Jordan stared at him, his gaze charged with meaning. "Do you understand now?" His voice was firm, but without aggression. The driver did not respond. Immediately, his eyes were downcast, fixed on the steering wheel as if he wanted to disappear from there. Then finally he swallowed hard and muttered, I shouldn't have done that. I was an idiot." Jordan crossed his arms, keeping his expression serious. "You know what bothers me most?" The driver looked up, waiting for the final sentence. "It wasn't just what you did to my mother. It was the fact that if she wasn't the mother of someone important, it would never have had any consequences. For you, how many other people have you treated like that? How many people have gone through what my mother went through and had to swallow the disrespect in silence?" The driver had no answers. His breathing was heavy, as if Jordan's every word sank deep into his consciousness. The truth was harsh, impossible to ignore. He scratched the back of his head nervously, trying to find something to say, but there was no excuse that could erase what he had done. Jordan took a deep breath. He could end that man's career right then and there. I could guarantee that he would never drive a luxury car again, that he would feel the weight of the choices he made. But he knew that the real lesson was not in punishment, but in change. He leaned forward slightly and said clearly, "Never judge someone by their appearance, as you may be disrespecting the wrong person." The driver closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing those words as if they weighed tons. When he opened it again, his expression had changed. It was no longer just fear or despair. It was the realization that all his life he had been doing wrong, and that, for the first time, he was being forced to face it. Jordan exhaled slowly and picked up his cell phone. He knew that conversation wouldn't stay there. In a few minutes, everything that happened would go viral, serving as a lesson for thousands of people. Because that story wasn't just about an arrogant driver and a humble lady. It was about all the people who have ever been humiliated, about everyone who has ever felt small in the face of someone's arrogance. And the truth is that no one is free from life's twists and turns. Today, that driver thought he was superior. Tomorrow, I could be in the same position as the people I despised. Because life has a curious way of teaching lessons, and some of them come in the most unexpected ways. Now tell me, have you ever been through something like this? Have you ever been judged by your appearance? If you have ever experienced an unfair situation, comment, "Respect comes first," because this story needs to reach more people. And if you want to see another example of how destiny can surprise, watch the video that is appearing on your screen right now. In it, Jordan meets a man who was once by his side in the most difficult times, but who now faces dark times. Click to watch and understand how a simple gesture can change everything.